particular Hollywood story will leave you shaken and stirred, to say the least, because it's one of the most celebrated stars that we'd love to know a lot more about. When you think about it, he shot to fame in the early 1960s as a complete unknown. He'd been in a couple of movies, but nothing like that was going to happen once he signed on the dotted line to be James Bond 007 in Doctor No. His story, as I say, was particularly fascinating, and I was lucky enough to meet him as ever briefly. I've met most of the James Bonds, in fact, really, and they were all, I mean, when you think about it, they all realised what a big break that particular brand gave them. But it's always the first, isn't it, that really everybody likes. Sean Connery, Sir Sean Connery, as you know, we lost only a couple of years ago now. And it would have been fascinating to find out about his particular story. At one point, he was looking at publishing his autobiography because, as ever, he wanted to set the record straight. Here was a man, really, that had really clawed his way up from literally nothing, like the idea of acting, moved into the world of theatre, appearing at the Theatre Royal Drury Lane in their musical South Pacific, only because, of course, he was a former bodybuilder. Excellently good looking, good body, and was able to throw the girls around the stage, and not just on the Theatre Royal Drury Lane, of course, but around the tour as well, up and down the United Kingdom. Once he'd done that, he decided that he wanted to move into the world of film, and his next big break really came along all thanks to this particular lady, Lana Turner, who was coming over to England to make a movie in the late 1950s called Another Place, Another Time. I think that was the title. However, Lana didn't necessarily want to audition Sean Connery when she was presented with that picture. And apparently she said, I'll take him. She didn't know what he sounded like, how tall he was, whatever. She just liked the look of him. What a girl, eh? And what happened then was that she decided that she quite liked Sean Connery pre-Bond, as you can imagine. But, well, she was sort of slightly involved with someone else. Remember that particular gangster? Johnny Stampanato, yes. He came over to London as well, threatened to knock Sean's lights out on the set over at Shepperton, I believe it was. And the bottom line was Sean hit back and Johnny shot away, never to return. That was the power of the forthcoming James Bond. Apparently, though, he signed a deal in the later part of his life for a 100,000-word biography, but decided, even after 8 months of sitting alongside a celebrated author, that he didn't really wish to continue and move forward, so he gave the advance back. Now, according to that author, who's still with us, he didn't really understand what the problem was with the book. But according to Sean himself, who spoke to a few people about it, he didn't necessarily like revisiting the past. He liked remembering some of the things, but he felt that it was an intrusion, and perhaps really his own legacy should be the films and the performances that he'd left behind. The other problem, of course, with Sean was that he did have a bit of a jealousy factor and didn't necessarily like that other people reminded him that there were other James Bonds, including a good chum of mine, Sir Roger Moore. Even Sir Roger said while they got on, there was always a thin line with Sean where he could explode at any minute, reminding people that he'd in fact created the role. Let's not forget, Sean wasn't the first choice by the production team, Cubby Broccoli. Basically, they had their eyes on other people, but they were too expensive and they needed to get production moving. And it was while casting around that someone saw Sir Sean Connery in that movie with Lana Turner, of which he gave a sterling performance. But again, as Sir Roger Moore told me, he'd already beaten him to Lana Turner because he'd starred in 1955 in a film with her called Diane. That wasn't successful also. But as Sir Roger also pointed out, Lana Turner could honestly say that she performed opposite not one, but two James Bonds. And according to a very good source, she was very keen to insert herself into the Bond franchise too, even reaching out to Sir Sean Connery at some point to see if there was any type of role. But according to Sean, he felt that her name would eclipse that of the story simply because she was a world famous mega movie star. But as Sir Roger told me, perhaps it was the fact that she may just eclipse the then unknown, but now equally well known, Sir Sean Connery. Either way, he was a complex man, but either way, his manuscript remains under lock and key, and no one is allowed to actually print it at this stage. Even lawyers working for the publishers who originally commissioned it are basically finding it very hard to find a loophole to get moving and push it forward. Now, I bet that would be a lovely problem for the British monarchy to have, or have enjoyed, or indeed had, with that sibling known as Prince Harry. As ever, I'd love to know what you think to this particular story in the comments below. Would you pay to read Sir Sean Connery's autobiography? And even though he told it himself, do you prefer a biography that's written by someone else that digs a little bit deeper than perhaps they're willing to reveal? Either way, do let me know below. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.